So we come from the city of Sweden in the country of Europe. It's really like that when you compare it to a country like Nigeria, and it's pretty mind-blowing knowing that you guys, you have 200 million people here, almost half the population of Europe in one country. So it's more than an honor to be here, it's actually a privilege. So first of all, when it comes to data, we know from Swedish research that 95% of patients are more than willing to share their data, as long as they understand two things: why they should do it and the purpose. And this is the big problem with the life science sector today. There is a misconception that patients don't want to share their data. So what we have done is that we have built this into an actual value proposition that will improve mental health on the War on Cancer app. So on War on Cancer, as a user, if you share your own health data with us that we can then share with the life science sector, survive, or if you help somebody else actually live through or cope through cancer in a better way, we will let you know. So Track Your Impact will essentially show you on a world map where your suffering has actually made a difference. And this is why people will share data on the platform. And what will we do with the data is perhaps an even more interesting question. So the B2B value proposition. And everything that we're trying to do at War on Cancer is this. It's a simplified view of us trying to make sad patients into happy individuals. Unfortunately for cancer patients, they have to undergo diagnosis, then treatment, then life after cancer, or living with cancer if you're chronic. But the value proposition that we have is trying to make this less painful. And how can we do that? Well, we looked at cancer research. And what is the biggest sort of barrier to accelerating cancer research? It's clinical trials. And I'm sure that most of you are aware of what clinical trials are, but it's basically what is needed to be conducted in order for new treatments to reach new targets, new markets and patients. And when is a clinical trial important? Well, from a pharmaceutical point of view, just to give you sort of the situation we have here, there are 37,000 active clinical trials in cancer today. We know from a statistical point of view that 60% of them will fail. And the biggest reason for this is that they can't find patients that are willing to participate. If you look at this from an industry perspective, it's really bad efficiency. If you look at it from a patient perspective, it's horrendous. Because when is a clinical trial needed from a patient's perspective? Well, if you're diagnosed with something that your doctor tells you he or she can't treat, you need a clinical trial in order to survive. If you're treated, but the treatment doesn't work, you need to find a clinical trial. We can move forward 2 slides, I think. Yeah. And if you're one of those people that actually survive cancer, but you get a relapse, you also need to find a clinical trial. So this is our first value proposition towards the industry. We're basically creating a source, a match.com, for finding patients to clinical trials so we can relieve them of this burden. The next value proposition is real-world data. So you know, like on a global level, everybody's talking about how to treat symptoms, how to cure cancer. But what is also very important is understanding how mental health, exercise, and nutritional intake actually affects treatment outcome. What Fabian mentioned before, what can he as a patient or you as patients do to improve your chances of surviving if you don't have access to healthcare or to drugs? So this is our second value proposition. We could talk pretty much forever about this and how we're building this, but I think it's more important that you know that we are building this. And I'm very happy to say that now you have opened up Africa to us. So Nigeria will be our pilot market on this beautiful continent. And War on Cancer is more than a digital platform, and it's more than an attempt to change the world. It's really about making patients and everyone affected by cancer feel like themselves and not only as patients. And it doesn't matter if you're from Europe, if you're from the US, or if you're from Nigeria. The end goal with this is that we, I hope, because we have some global pharmaceutical companies as partners, is that when we get enough of a Nigerian population on our platform, and we know enough about their diagnosis, the treatment they're going through, or the treatment that they're not going through, the age, gender, where they're located, we can actually bring our partners here and provide clinical trials free of charge, offering the best healthcare service there is. So I would like to end with this movie. It's a very good movie. Yeah.
Cancer, it is incapable of any form of reasoning, and it grows stronger because we fear it. Going through cancer is an extremely lonely process. When I got diagnosed, I completely broke down, but I decided to post a message on Facebook to let my friends and family know. Hello, my friends, family, and followers. On the 1st of July, I was diagnosed with leukemia. For those of you who are not familiar with this term, it's blood cancer. The post was shared 13,000 times. I discovered there is a power in us sharing our stories. Sharing creates energy. Each story you read about reaffirms you're not alone. We have created the storytelling platform waroncancer.com for everyone who has their life touched by cancer. Our mission is simple: to make the world a better place for future generations of cancer warriors. This is the time when we can all come together and feel safe knowing that we are not alone in the fight.
For my friend.
Det här är för mina kusiner.
Pelo meu irmão.
Okay, das ist für meine Freunde in Hamburg.
För min vän.
هذا حق أمي.
Para el hijo de mis vecinos. Det här är för min vän.
Det här är för min vän.
This is for my grandfather.
Wannan na Aisha ne.
Para minha tia.
För min farmor och farfar.
For my grandmother. Para meu camarada. For min uncle. For my uncle.
Esto es para mi tía.
For my friend.
This is for my friend's dad.
هذا حق ربعنا.
За подругу.
Для моего любимого человека, моего мужа.
For myself.
This is a platform for all of us, because in the war on cancer, we are more powerful together.
I try to avoid what every Nigerian MC does. They always say, give him another round of applause. But I think I'm going to do so on this occasion. Please give them another round of applause. Sebastian talked about the size and population of Nigeria, the fact that we have 200 million people. What he probably doesn't know is that we are about 50% Christian, 50% Muslim in Nigeria. So that's quite a unique mix. But what is even more interesting is that 100% believe in witchcraft. We hope that with the work of organizations like War on Cancer, we can start to focus on science to solve some of the difficulties that we have, as well as emotional support when things go wrong, and so that when we get cancer, we don't think that it's witchcraft from the village that has caused it. As the world develops, the issue of cybersecurity and the economics of data becomes more and more important. All over the world, people have talked about the impact of digital technology, on things like elections, and I'm being very careful not to mention any particular countries. But we are pleased to have with us the regional head of security of MasterCard. I know some of you that were here yesterday were waiting for me to pronounce another name, but it's not going to happen. It's MasterCard. So we have Amit Mehta, the regional head of security of MasterCard, who's going to be giving us a keynote speech on the economics of data and cybersecurity. Mr. Mehta, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. What a powerful message from this previous speaker. Let me just make sure this is working first. Okay, perfect. So my name is Amit, and I'm the regional head of security for MasterCard. I'm here to talk about cybersecurity. In today's world, no conversation about digital is complete unless you talk about cybersecurity. The way we are connecting and the way the world is moving and changing, cybersecurity is becoming a permanent risk to us. According to the World Economic Forum, cybersecurity is one of the top 5 risks facing the world today. Let's see how our world is changing. This is the internet back in 1973, called the ARPANET, had 45 nodes. This is the internet today. Guess how many nodes are connected to the internet today? 22 billion nodes. And this number is increasing. We are producing a lot of data. As per the numbers, we are producing 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every day. Just to put this into perspective, this is equivalent to 90 years of high-definition recording. And the third dimension is technology. Technology or software is inherently insecure. According to the research, there is around 15 to 50 errors or bugs in 1,000 lines of code. And if you look at this chart, sorry, it's not very clear. A typical software today has around millions of lines of code. So if I was to pick one from this list, Boeing 787 flight simulator has 14 million lines of code. The fighter jet engine has around 24 million lines of code. And this number increases as the systems are becoming more complicated and distributed. So what does it all mean? Explosion in data, inherently insecure technology and software which has bugs, and hyperconnectivity that we talk about. This is causing a perfect storm. What do I mean by that? Today, anyone who has access to a mobile device sitting behind a computer can create damage to an individual, to government, or at a country level. Let's take some examples here. I wanted to show you a video, but somehow it didn't work. But these two guys called Chris and Charlie Muller, they were able to hack into Jeep Grand Cherokee software in 2015. Sitting in their house, they managed to control the car, switch on the air conditioning, control the speed of the car, and bring the car to complete halt on the highway. In 2017, WannaCry was one of the biggest cyber attacks that the world has seen. It impacted 150 organizations across the world. To give an example, National Health Service of the UK was brought to complete standstill. Doctors had to turn down patients, and surgeons could not do surgery because there was no patient data available. This is the reliance we have on computer systems today. British Airways had around 100 flight cancellations last year, I think, or 2 years ago, because of the system issue, which resulted in a loss of around $114 million, euros. Does anyone know this guy? His name is Daniel Kay. He is a hacker who lives in the UK. And 2016, someone from Liberia gave him some money to attack the telecom company of Liberia. So what he did, he went online, compromised certain model of Chinese cameras, and basically it was around, I think, 100,000 cameras that he was able to compromise. And then he used all those cameras together to send the data request to the telecom company. It crippled the infrastructure of the telecom company, brought the country to 2 days standstill. No internet, no connectivity. This is what cybersecurity can do to organizations, to governments, if not, cyber threat can do to organizations if not done properly. What are the biggest challenges? In terms of the cyber crime, if you look at the numbers, it's a $1.5 trillion economy on its own. And this number is set to become $6 trillion by 2025. Some of the key global challenges facing the governments and institutions around cybersecurity. This is the map, which is basically the global threat landscape. It's produced by the International Telecom Union and shows the countries' commitment to cybersecurity. Countries which are in the darker shade of gray have blue have the lowest commitment to cybersecurity versus the other countries. So we, as countries and governments, we need to be thinking more seriously about cybersecurity. Skill shortage is another big challenge. As we speak today, the world is facing 1.5 million shortage skills in cybersecurity. And this number is set to become to 3.5 million by 2021. Nigeria, according to the data, has around 1,800 cybersecurity professionals for the entire economy. So we need to think through this, and we need to do a lot more to bring this number up. The number of attacks and attempts on the networks of governments and institutions have significantly increased. Last year alone, we faced, as a company globally, around 120 attempts by the bad guys to penetrate our network. And if you want to put this number into perspective, this is around 200,000 attempts per day. And this is not different from any other global organization. Interesting part, most of these attempts are targeting people, the human layer, because that's where the weakest link is. You know, companies and governments can invest in technology, but it's the human layer which is the most vulnerable. Small businesses. This is an interesting one. You know, the world economy, the small businesses play a key role in the world economy and in Nigeria as well. And according to the numbers, 43% of cyber attacks target small businesses, and they can easily take out a number of businesses out of business because of the complexity of these attacks. And finally, the rise of the dark web, or the hidden web, right? The internet that we see is only 25% of the internet. 75% of the internet we don't get to see. It's anonymous and it's all hidden. There are online marketplaces where the data is sold and bought. Cyber weapons or cyber technology is leased by criminals to attack other to organizations and governments. And this is an area where the governments and the private sector has to play a key role, because due to the inherent design of the internet, you really cannot close the dark web. But if you work together with law enforcement, with the governments and companies, there's an opportunity there. What is MasterCard doing in this space? So we have a strong feeling that we can't be secure alone. Our partners, our ecosystem, they all have to be secure. So we created a place called a Fusion Center a couple of years ago. And in this center, we have got experts from different teams sitting and monitoring the dark web and the open web for threat intelligence. The moment we see something which is linked to the brand or to our customers, we pick up that information, we validate that information, and we share that information with our customers. Back in Easter this year, we had some insights and intelligence from our sources about a potential bank attack in one of the countries in Africa. We shared that information proactively, and we were able to avoid that attack. We understand that small businesses have to be protected. They don't have the tools, the resources, and the pockets to invest in cybersecurity. We have partnered with a number of companies to create a cybersecurity toolkit, free-to-use toolkit, available online for small businesses to download and basically better protect themselves from cyber threats. Recently, we have partnered with FBI, and we have created something called No More Ransom. So as you know, ransomware attacks are growing these days. And once someone is hit by a ransomware attack, their computer systems are encrypted, and unless they pay the ransom, the keys won't be released. So we have created this platform where you can register and basically ask for keys. If someone has already seen the keys before, they can give the keys to you. So final thoughts. As you see in this chart, the worldwide security spending has increased by 12 to 14% every year. Yet, the number of incidents and breaches have also gone up. And the question is why? My view is that we are looking at cybersecurity as a technology problem. We are trying to create point solutions and IT fixes for the problem. But if you are looking at a digital economy and you want to create more digital ecosystems, I think you need to think broader. You need to have a very clear cyber strategy. What is the strategy? Who are the key players? Who are your key partners? What are the expected outcomes? Have to have fine governance. How do we monitor and govern this digital ecosystem? What is the baseline that we expect from everyone who plays a role in this ecosystem? Does everyone have to have a security baseline? And finally, risk management. So monitoring your digital ecosystem to understand what is the weakest link, what are the choke points, and what are your single points of failure is absolutely key. And finally, just to wrap up, most digital economies are fundamentally dependent on the computer systems, and if these systems are not available, economies cannot function. Cyber incidents are not happening because of bad luck. They're happening because we are not taking security seriously. They're happening because we are not patching systems and not securing systems. As a stat, 93% of all cyber attacks in 2017 could have been prevented by basic security hygiene, just by patching systems, by training employees to recognize bad emails, phishing emails. Government should work with private sector to ensure everyone in the digital ecosystem has a security baseline, create a cybersecurity index, and incentivize good players, tax breaks or any other examples. Encourage the participation of technologists and cybersecurity experts in policy making. Technology these days has a deep social impact. You cannot not have a technologist and a cybersecurity expert in your organization. And finally, trust in this digitally connected world is absolutely key. So when my smartphone wants to authenticate to my car to play music, and my car authenticates to my email system so that I can look at my emails, and I can authenticate to my smart coffee machine in my office so that my coffee is ready on time, all that authentication cannot happen in the traditional way of username and passwords. It has to be automated, it has to be seamless, and for that, digital trust has to be created. And you can't create digital trust in this hyper-connected world unless you invest in technologies such as AI, machine learning, and blockchain. That's it from me, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much to Amit Mehta, Regional Head of Security of MasterCard. The Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports, Mr. Sunday Dare, has recently been posting some pictures on Twitter. I find it very difficult to follow computer games when my kids play them. It just moves too fast for me. But then seeing some of the videos he's been posting of some very young girls who are boxing and sparring, I realized that it wasn't actually computer games. I'm just getting old. These things are just too fast for me these days. It gives me great pleasure to invite the Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Mr. Sunday Dare, to address us on the role of youth and sports development in leveraging the digital economy for trade and investment. Mr. Dare.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. It amazes me each time I'm called up to speak, and the first thing I say is, good morning, everyone, and I get no response until I do it the second time. So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, good morning. The Minister of Science and Tech had to leave. I've also noticed that the Swedish ambassador has left. But let me just say that it's a pleasure to be here today, to be in this room that is buzzing with a lot of tech heads and tech-savvy people. And I thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak for maybe 3 or 4 minutes. Maybe I can say I practically get crushed. But all the same, my passion for youth development, which I could say was a bit passive until 3 months ago, when the president of this country appointed me as the Youth and Sports Development Minister. It became active, super active, hyperactive. I stand here this morning as someone who is passionate about youth development in this country, who is also concerned about the fact that uplifting our youth over the years, we've not been able to catch up as a country and as a people. As much as we have tried, the numbers of our youth, the number of those we've been able to lift out of unemployment and poverty has not been able to increase by the same stride, basically because of the challenges of the digital economy and the 21st century digital world. In 2018, the MasterCard Foundation changed its focus to look exclusively at addressing youth employment in Africa. And that says a lot. So the MasterCard Foundation got it right. And just 3 days ago, November 12th, Tuesday this week, we celebrated the Africa Youth Day as designated by the Africa Union. That's the mantra. That is, in the aspect of employment, engagement, entrepreneurship, and education. So just as we have the challenge of ratcheting up the numbers of our youth that are empowered in Nigeria, the same obtains for the whole of Africa. A report that came out 3 months ago by global CEOs who met found out that there's a digital skills gap in the whole of Africa, more so in Nigeria, with its population of 68 to 70 million youth. There are jobs, but our youth are not employable. Why? Because they lack digital skills. As I speak, there are 250 digital skills products that our youth. The last speaker spoke about cybersecurity. You can see the amount of jobs available, almost 1.2. Is it billion available? Yet there are no off-takers. So on Tuesday we launched what we call the New Deal for the Nigerian youth. Deal as in D-E-E-L, with the sole purpose of addressing the digital skills gap in this country. In a digital economy, driven by digital technology, our youth cannot find the jobs they need. They cannot be employable unless they acquire these skills, either the basic digital skills, the intermediate skills, or even the advanced skills. So we launched Deal, focusing on just job creation and entrepreneurship skills. And I'm happy Mrs. Miriam is here. She was with me on Tuesday, and she's critical on behalf because of the work she's been doing under SIP in the last 4 years. I just have 3 slides. So the next slide. Keep going, not this. Keep going, keep going, keep going. All right, stay there. So you ask me, what is DEAL? The whole goal is to keep our youths busy. D stands for digital skills, literacy, and acquisition. E stands for entrepreneurship. The second E stands for employment or employability. And the last one stands for leadership. We believe that under this focus, we're able to address the objectives that we have. There are several programs under each of the D, the E, and the L. And next slide. The DY.NG is our big thing, Digital Youth Nigeria, to create over 500,000 Nigerian youths that have digital literacy or digital skills, whether at the basic skills, the intermediate skills, or the advanced skills, as the case may be. There are other details about how we're going to activate that. The slide can keep running while I round up. But also, there's another big project which is called NOYA. If you go towards the last, second to the last, NOYA? NOYA simply means Nigerian Online Youth Assembly. Rwanda, 4 years ago, launched what was called the Youth Connect. It is a website where the youth can connect in Rwanda, but they also made that available to the youth across the continent. When I became minister, I found out that over 20 countries in Africa had plugged in. Nigeria as a country had not plugged in. So that led me to do some kind of research. I tried to find out how many hours do our youth in this country spend online on the average. I found out they spend 6.5 hours on a daily basis on this smartphone. I followed that up with trying to find out where is the best place to meet the Nigerian youth, online or offline. It came back 71% online. So that told me something. That first, we ought to plug into the Youth Connect set up by Rwanda. But also, I said with our sheer population of youth in this country, why can't we have our own Youth Connect? And that led me into the idea of NOYA, developed together with the Ministry of Youth and Sports Development. NOYA overriding obsession is that we need to create opportunities for our youth. We need to aggregate the opportunities. We need to give them access to those opportunities. That is what NOYA intends to do. That is an aggregator website that will meet our youth online. It gives them a platform. It's a portal where opportunities will be created for them. They can go there to access these programs. We have so many programs that will come on this. is also a site to recruit our youth for several programs. A transparent, because they have digital footprints, a transparent, trustworthy platform through which you can enroll and recruit them for all our programs. And finally, I think the most important for us, the youth of this country, and I know this message will go out, is that in the United Nations system, which is a global system, Nigeria has been given 121 slots to bring in our youth, to be plugged into the UN system for 2 years. That is one of the biggest opportunities ever given to youth on the African continent for a particular country. But this youth, before we can really plug them into this system, must have digital literacy, digital skills, and digital knowledge. So I thank you so much for listening. We intend to make sure that we prepare our youth for the opportunities that exist, and we believe that the time to start is now. So you join me and the Nigerian youth to say, let's deal. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Honorable Minister. We're going to take another short presentation by Omedia Network. Omedia Network is a global network of innovators, entrepreneurs, technologists, advocates, investors, activists, and organizations committed to addressing the most critical economic, technological, and societal issues of our time. It gives me great pleasure to invite Amin Magdi of Omedia Network to give us some brief remarks. Amin.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. No presentation. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, thank you for inviting me. I was very much pleased to get this invitation because I've seen the example that Nigeria can show in other countries. We recently organized a knowledge sharing experience, a workshop where the government of Ethiopia was developing its digital ID system, and NIMSI came along with Lanre here, who's done a great job organizing this session, came and shared the experience and the journey that Nigeria has gone through in the case of digital identity. So I was compelled to come and to learn. I'm one of those people who was a first-time visitor to this country, so very much appreciated the opportunity. And I just wanted to share a few points. As I'm heading back to Ethiopia and then on to Sudan over the next day, and we'll be leaving earlier and won't be able to join the panel. I work on digital identity because in order to be able to leverage the benefits of the digital economy, we all have to identify ourselves, be able to identify and authenticate who we are. In the world, there's about 1 billion people who have no ability to identify themselves. They have no documentation. When that's the case, they lack access to services, lack access to healthcare or education, and they cannot avail of the services of government. Around half of that total, 500 million people approximately, are African. So I lead an initiative here in Africa to try to support how digital identity gets done. But here when we think about digital ID, it's not just formal issued ID, it's also the fact that when we engage in internet systems, digital systems, we leave data behind, and that data collectively can effectively profile us and become a de facto digital identity. When we think about digital identity, we have a notion of it should be good digital identity. And why? Because technologies we've seen can be a tremendous force for good. We just heard the Honorable Minister and how the internet will be used to promote youth job creation. We also just heard about cancer. We believe the problems of our time often require collective interest. You think of climate change, agriculture, any other field. But technology can also be used for harm. We see hate speech. We see cyber breaches, as we just heard. The cost of those to companies and to organizations. We've seen what is a very good platform for people to share and connect with each other also be used. When data is used to collect profiles on us, sometimes it's used for personalization, but can also be used to influence us the wrong way, as we've seen in some elections around the world. 58% of people see privacy as a crisis. It's a survey from last year, and believe that something needs to be done about it. And that perception is, although that's in the US, that survey, you've seen surveys around the world showing the same thing. And when that's the case, what people are saying is, we love the technology, but we're not sure it's in our long-term interest. And when people see this as a crisis, we believe that the industry, by amassing personal data without the right norms and safeguards in place, actually is creating a bit of a race to the bottom, because there's more in belief that more and more data gets better products and services. And I'm a great fan of personalization. There was a chart up that showed one of the unicorns called Spotify. I love Spotify. I use it every day, and it knows me better than I know myself, I have to say. It picks songs that I've never heard of that I just love. But we also know that you can do those things without the risks. We're investing in a company that does personalization on device rather than centrally, for example, so no data leakage happens. Companies that do encryption, companies that do all kinds of privacy technology, on our for-profit side, we're investing in that. And I'm here basically also to say that Nigeria can be a leader in doing technology in a way that is both good for people, good for the firms, and good for the country. To not have a sector that races to the bottom in the sense of amassing data without use, but rather has the safeguards in place. Of the countries in Africa, there's about 20 that have data protection laws and about 16 that have authorities. Nigeria is a leader among those. There is a law and there is a regulator in place. We believe that technology should put people first, in the sense that there should be open dialogue and consultations with people who are affected by the technology. Digital ID systems should include civil society consultations and others, so people understand the purpose and our people are included, both in the process and the product. Privacy, security, and user centricity. People developing technologies could systematically ask, what is the potential for harm? Not also, what is the potential good? We should ask both. And in that sense, we believe that with the AFCTA, there's an opportunity to set a high standard for technology. And we believe Nigeria can be a leader in that opportunity. We believe that the capability is here, and any good movement, anytime we can create a force for good in the economy and in society, it needs leadership. We believe that you have the capable people here. You have a tech sector that's growing. You have the institutions in place and the leadership who believes in this. We'd love to see you play a role, and we'd love to work with you in that process. Thank you again. My name is Magdi Amin, Omidyar Network, Managing Director and focusing on digital identity in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Magdi. Just to again welcome everyone who's visiting Nigeria for the first time. You can finally now say you've lived. And when we give you a visa to Nigeria, we don't tell you that it comes with one additional condition. And that condition is that you must do two things. You must try our jollof rice, and you must confirm that it is the best jollof rice in the world. If you don't do that, I cannot guarantee your ability to leave at the end of your visit. You'll have a wonderful opportunity to try our jollof rice this evening because there's a dinner at 7 o'clock. The venue will be here at the banquet hall. I've received confirmation that the Vice President intends to attend the dinner. Please be here at 7 o'clock for the dinner and an opportunity to interact with His Excellency, the Vice President. We will go straight on to a leadership panel discussion now. As I told you, we are a country that's about 50% Christian, 50% Muslim. Friday is worship day for our Muslim brothers and sisters, and therefore we want to do everything we can to round up the program to enable people go and worship shortly after lunch, shortly after lunchtime. To moderate the next panel will be my friend and brother, Mr. Lanre Oshibono. The discussion will be about digital drivers for economic empowerment, looking at issues of identity, finance, connectivity, skills, platforms, various tools, how to harvest economic potentials of big data within a secure network. Those to be on the panel will be Venkatesh Hiriharan of Future States and Omidyar Network, Kojo Boache of Facebook, Henrik Landgren of EQT, Sweden, Estelle Westlin of Grace Health, and my sister and friend, Mrs. Miriam Uwais, the Special Advisor to the President on Social Investment. Please give them a round of applause as they come onto the stage.
Okay, good morning everyone, and Honorable Minister, Youth and Sports, thank you very much for being here with us, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you on a Friday to have you all here. I think we're extremely convinced that we have the support for trying to achieve this digital economy for Nigeria. So welcome panelists. Literally just you can pick on what you want to speak about. So we want to focus the conversation really looking at the end goal for the citizens. There's been a whole lot of talk around startups, technology, but what does it mean to the citizen? If we're speaking to a governor of a state and talking about this laudable digital economy, which is fantastic news, but what does it mean to his citizens? How does the citizen benefit? So it'd be good that we can share that conversation here. But also the safeguards. How do we ensure, as Ms. Magdine mentioned earlier on, that there are safeguards that ensures it doesn't be the next way whereby people are controlled or not really getting much benefit. And I think all in all, also to look at the conversations between where the real startups also come in, great self. So if I put a question to, I don't know, want to pick up the conversation, just let me know. On the empowerment, I think that's the most important. How does it benefit the citizen? What's the benefit to the regular guy to have a digital economy, to participate in a digital economy? Overall, for us, it's about economic prosperity and an inclusive growth. So,
thanks, Landry. This is a topic that I can speak on for hours, but I'll keep it really short. Privacy is a crisis, as you know, Magdi pointed out, 58% of Americans think that they have lost control over their data. So there are two scenarios. If we do nothing as a society, in the next 10 years, individuals will lose control over their data. We share our data. There are organizations that are looking at our data, running their algorithms, and then, based on that, there are predictions that are made, credit ratings, etc. So in the next 10 years, if we do nothing, what will happen is that our data will be out there. It will be used to run models that predict about us, and we have very little control over it. The other alternative scenario is that in the next 10 years, we as government, we as private players, private enterprises, we put new systems in place that give technical control over data and legal control over data. So we have tried some experiments in India where we are building new systems where individuals will have the ability to share data, the ability to revoke consent to data, the ability to audit where all their data has been used. And the practical use case of this is that if I want to apply for a loan, I will be able to share my data in a secure model with third parties, with lending institutions, with banks, etc., and be able to get back loan offers in a instantaneous format. And fundamentally, this requires data infrastructure to be built by the government. So what we are doing is we are building out something called the Public Credit Registry, which will give a lending institution the ability to look at my borrowing, current state of borrowing. And then there is a model called the account aggregator, which gives the lending institution the ability to look at my potential to repay the loan. What is my cash flows? Will I be able to take so much of a loan? And we are also building out digital technology platforms which enable instantaneous payment of the money into my bank account. So we are solving two problems. The ability to enable financial inclusion means that you have to solve two problems. One is the information asymmetry. So as a lending institution, I need to know what kind of borrowing and what's the ability to repay of this individual. And the second thing is I need to bring down the transaction cost. So we're solving this using large public digital platforms that are built out, that are being built out even as we speak now. And the model is completely different compared to the way data has evolved. Today we have very little control over the data that we create once we put it out there. In this model, what we are doing is we are saying that the individual is completely in control of their data and they have complete ability to audit the data, etc. So we believe that this model will really enable large-scale financial inclusion, and the relevance for countries like Africa is that because a lot of Africa is small and medium enterprises, the ability to look at data flows and build credit histories on top of that and build lending platforms on top of this data is going to be enormously, enormously powerful. So I can talk about that later if we have time, but let me stop here.
Excellent. I know India for us, is a good case to look at because it really depicts how Nigeria is, diversity, culture, and also economic spread, empowerment spread. I think it would be good to listen to Facebook. Kojo, your thoughts, please.
Does it work? Does it work? Okay. No? Does that work? Okay, good. All right. Good morning, everybody. I trust everybody's well. Appreciate the opportunity, Lamre, to be here. I'm hoping that actually colleagues are going to help me answer Lamre's first question, which is, what does it mean to the citizen? What does everything we're talking about here, connectivity, the opportunities presented by it, and the privacy piece, which I know Venki was talking about, and maybe I'll zero in later. I'm going to ask the audience to help me learn and understand what it might mean to the Nigerian citizen across all 36 states in the FCT. So, audience, can you help me? First of all, who will participate in an exercise which will only ask you to give me a show of hands? So how many of you will participate? Thank you, sir. No, because this is the electorate, this is the account. So I want to know how many will participate. So how many will participate? Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Great. Okay. This morning, when you woke up, out of those who are participating, and feel free to join in late if you want to, who reached out for a loved one? Who, the first thing you touched was a loved one?
Physically or...
Physically touched was a loved one.
Not through the mobile phone.
No. Fantastic. Who reached out for the Quran? Fantastic. Who reached out for their Bible? Wonderful. Who reached out for their mobile phone?
Through their mobile phone.
No.
Is that okay?
No. Your loved one, you can do that. You can love one through the mobile phone. But I think that's evidence of how impactful connectivity and the services that we've spoken about, some of those being developed by Nigerians and outside Nigerians, can be for the citizen here. So when we're asking a governor and we're trying to convince them to put in place the right policy and regulation that we've discussed over the last days and agreed, reached consensus on being so important, these are the reasons why. Because the majority of Nigerians will benefit, reach out for, and benefit from the connectivity that they bring and the services they bring. Whether it's contacting a loved one who may not be close by, whether it's making money, whether it's having or improving, increasing, maximizing efficiencies in their day with regard to decision making, etc. These are the impacts that they have. But I also think about, when I think about that, and I think I'm one of those people that unfortunately probably reaches out for my mobile phone before anything else first, I also think about those who don't have that opportunity. And I think that's the question as well, Lamre, is what does it mean to the citizen who will connect? But what does it mean for the citizen who won't connect? And every advantage that we take from connectivity and using services in a safe way, and we'll get onto that, there are 70% of Nigerians at this point in time, far more across the continent, 80% across the continent, 75%, who don't receive these benefits. And that's the question we should be zeroing on as well. What are those people missing out on? What is the country and the continent missing out on? And therefore, what is the world missing out on? Especially if we talk about what we've spoken about this morning, which is taking Nigerian ingenuity, expertise, entrepreneurialism beyond Nigeria as well.
Yeah. So I think it's what's the benefit of data to the average citizen? I think there is also very important for us as companies or governments or in general to also communicate the value that data can bring. Without asking for consent of sharing your data is also, before all of you raised your hand, you actually didn't ask or the question, why are we raising, or what benefit could this bring me sharing my data of, you know, consenting to be in this survey or consenting to leave my data. And I think that's also important, that it's so important for us as companies, as Facebook, as small companies, as Grace Health, communicating to each citizen, like, what's the effect of you also consenting to using our platform, sharing your data, what effect will it have? Because I don't think the average user or the average citizens know what it actually means, consenting or also sharing your data, and also what effect can have both well, we talked about cybersecurity here, but also the effects that it can have on the society, and what the role it has to driving progress for both, like, enables advocacy, accountability, accuracy. So I think that data has an enormous effect, but I think that we as these kind of stakeholders have a responsibility in also communicating the value of the data to the single user, so they can almost feel that they can barter with the data. Okay, I leave my data around this, but what can I get in return? Both finding these like intrinsic and extrinsic motivations of sharing my data, and actually like, how can I help, or how can this make my experience better? Because I think that's something that is failing. We're accepting these, you know, pages after pages after pages of terms and conditions, but we don't understand the true value of it.
Interesting. I think we're privileged to have a full, real case study of Nigerian government in an auntie of mine that I call her Excellency, Mrs. Miriam Uwais. I think who's been running the federal government social investment program that's reached out to, if my figures are right, at least in excess of 12 million homes or possibly more. So, and we're talking of the people in the more rural part of the country. So it'd be good to get some learnings, understand some of your challenges. You've shared a lot with me. I think a key partner of this program, MasterCard, might also be able to offer some answers to some of your questions. So I think the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm really enthused by the idea of engaging people that actually are experts in this area, because I'll admit that I'm not that digital. But I work with a lot of people that are actually challenged by how to get payments at the last mile. And this is because in our own environment, or in the space that I work in, there is no payment infrastructure, or hardly any payment infrastructure. So what happens is, you know, we pay cash at the last mile. What we've done to safeguard that is to ensure that the agents, the mobile money agents, we pay. I mean, we pay to pay them, or we send money, we disburse through. They've built a back-end technology, so we're able to see in a timely manner and reconcile when payments are made. Now, there's an urgent challenge that we see. There's something we need to address now, which is the fact that we have cashless Nigeria coming in March next year, which means we won't have access to the funds that we require to pay. We have essentially 3 programs that have this problem. We have the Jeep program, or the Trader Money program. We give loans of 10,000 naira to poor people without a collateral. All you need is a phone. Now that is a problem, because there are many that don't have phones. And there's a policy issue, because CBN, the KYC for Tier 1 is you must have a phone number. And what we've been lobbying for is for them to use the NIN number, the National Identity Number, as their KYC. Because, I mean, even where we do a lot of data collation, and in many of the communities that we work in, we do a community profiling. There's hardly any reception. Even if there's reception, there's no power. And so they can't even charge a phone. And even where you have reception and you have power, where you have poverty and a woman has to struggle with maybe 100 naira the entire month to manage the home, she's not going to prioritize the phone. She'd rather sell the phone than actually utilize it. So it's important for us to send money to her to add value to the fact that she has that phone. It's timely, it's objective, it's private. As you can imagine, when we pay in the afternoons. Everybody in the community knows. When we leave, there's the possibility that the husbands know, and they're seen as wealthy in their communities. They know they've collected. We pay 10,000 naira every 2 months for the cash transfers, And people visit them later to say, pay this levy, or, drop this, or the husbands can take this money from them. What we've done is to do a mapping of all the different payment service providers that exist in those communities. We've been working with DBN, the Development Bank, with CBN, with EFINA, anybody, the Lagos Business School, anybody that can help us with credible agents or fixed location agents or microfinance banks, so that we pay through them. And when we pay through them, the women now can access this money. But the problem is, in some of these locations, they're like 10 kilometers away from where these people live. And many of them are old, they're incapacitated. And so they're not able to travel. This is why we resorted to mobile money agents. Naira a month, and then you need to spend, we try to engage them, but as you all know, those that are Nigerian, it's very, very vast terrain. And what we've done deliberately is to start with the worst areas. So unless we can address those issues, we won't be able to address everybody. We have school feeding programs. We've ensured that all our cooks, we have 107,000 cooks now on our payroll, and all of them have had to open bank accounts. So they have debit cards, and they have BVNs, but they don't necessarily have payment service providers within their vicinities. And many of them use their children or their husbands or their counselors' numbers, phone numbers. And of course, that comes at a cost to them, which now depletes the amount that would have been available for the children to feed well. So that's another issue. And then the data collated we have data now from communities, and it's growing. We have data now being collated in 35 or 36 states. We have clean data from 33 states. And it's growing. We began with 30%. We got to 50% in some states, and now we're beyond that in about 4 or 5 states. That data is very, very important because it gives us a fair idea of the sizes of the household, the assets they own, whether they have roofing material, persons with disability, educational levels, vocation. We also have community profiling, so we know which communities have banks within their vicinities, very few. Which ones have payment service providers, which ones have supermarkets, police stations, primary schools, secondary schools. How far are they? We found in some of the communities that we've been to, at least the first 30%, 60% of them didn't even have a primary school within 5 kilometers. So just to give you a fair idea of how remote and how the terrain can be, in some of these places we go through, we go across the creeks to reach them. And they're more or less forgotten. It happens, I guess, in many developing countries. We tend to move ahead. I listened to the Honorable Minister of Sports here, and he's done a lot of work in the NCC, but when he says 91% of the youth say we want online, we want to be engaged online, he must have reached out to them online for them to say the 91%. There are masses of people who are not online and who have not been engaged on this question. So how do we reach these people? How do we engage these women and stop them from being extorted or intimidated, or, how do we ensure that we bring them into the formal economy? Because this is the only way that we can, we can actually reduce poverty. With the women that we actually pay these amounts to, we also have trained a number, in every community we have trained local government officials who visit them and support them on basic issues like forming savings groups, financial transactions. And, they're really resilient and hardworking. As you must know, many of our women in the rural areas are very, very hardworking. Just from 17 states, we've had, results. We have an amount that is 567 million naira that has been saved from this 5,000 monthly stipend. And 18,210 of them have taken loans, and less than 1,000 has defaulted. But unfortunately for us, many of our banks don't even, I mean, they're just too, they don't appreciate the volume. They want returns immediately. So we have to have a change in mindset, how to support these women. You know, there's hardly any regulation in that area on how to ensure that these women are protected and how they can become productive. And they are becoming I mean, our cash transfers are unconditional, the first set. And all of them that have schools by them have put their children back in school without that condition, because they know that that is what will make the difference to their lives. Once there's a school there, their children go back to school, and they are striving. You know, so, I mean, I am here just to talk about what our challenges are. I mean, with the 10,000 Naira, the Jeep program, because there's no collateral and what we tell them is if you pay 10,000 Naira back within 6 months, you now get 15,000 loan. If you pay back 15,000, you get a 30,000 Naira loan, you know, and many of them are paying back, you know, because this is the first time they have access to finance. They can't go into a bank and ask for a loan for 10,000. Nobody will look at them. But these people are now so excited that they actually can get, and the other thing when you talk about credit rating is that we are building a history for them. Once they can show that they've paid back, we're hoping that by the time they get to the peak, which is 100,000 Naira, they can now borrow from banks. And banks can see that they're actually credit worthy because they've made the payments back. But I think, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's not just us, it's also about infrastructure, it's about the mindset, getting the private sector to engage with what we're doing, to appreciate that the numbers are going to really help them. A lot of the mobile money agents that we work with are very happy. We pay the transaction fees, and so they are secure. They know that they will get paid per person that they actually disburse money to. And I guess I could talk forever, but let me just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miriam. I think you really touched on a key, real, live challenge that we have in Nigeria. And I just wonder if MasterCard wants to look at around the question of payment is a choice. But I'm also glad that Honorable Minister of Youth and Sport, who was at the regulator before, is also here listening. Because the question around the benefits that can derive from digital is clear, because we're missing that now with the many people that you're reaching, which is still very manual and is not digitized. So there's a massive challenge. So I don't know if MasterCard wants to touch on, if you have a magic solution for us. Do you want to?
There's a mic on.
Do you want to?
Why don't we perhaps we can pick it up offline?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's fine. So I'll pass on to Fabian on equity to also speak to your experience.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to the panel. I mean, as an investor, I look at, as I mentioned before, we as a team look at 5,000 companies every year in tech, and most of those ideas are ideas that will be realized within the next 5-10 years. So I go home from work every day feeling that I've been spending my day in the future every day. So I can, I feel like I have a crystal ball into what will come. So if you ask me, what this means for citizens, I mean, I can tell you that the future looks good. There is so much development that will happen across every vertical, across everything that you need in your life as a citizen, in healthcare, in education, in the way we get foods, the way we travel. Everything is about to change to the better way. And I think this is really fascinating. Thinking about what we have today, then going back to today's life in 2019, it's easy to just accept how things work today. how the doctor system, the healthcare system work and the education system work. But those systems that we live in today are designed, 10, 20, 30 years ago when the data did not exist, when technology did not exist. So of course those systems are not designed to what we can do today. And that's why it's very obvious that all of these systems will be improved. So, I mean, just thinking about healthcare, why are we only receiving reactive healthcare when you're sick? Why don't you get proactive healthcare? Why are you not able to get treatments or diagnosis which is actually accurate? Because, well, today you can only meet a doctor who has that doctor's experience in his head to diagnose you, and that's impossible to be as efficient as if you actually would be able to look at much more cases to diagnose you. So that goes for every vertical. So education, why am I treated, why am I educated in the way I am today, when you can do that much, much better. So this will touch and improve every day of every citizen's life, I think.
What's the threat? What's the threat to this bright future? What threatens? So we want to come out of this with some practical things for Nigeria, right? And I think we've spoken about some real challenges on the ground, and we've spoken about a bright future that you see. And I was struck by your presentation where you're able Stockholm, where you're able in Stockholm to analyze data from all these companies and track and find out which ones are going to be successful. And Estelle, how you use data as well to intervene in health. I'm wondering, in the way that all these companies use data, I think the MasterCard presentation was really interesting at the same time about how data is used and how it needs to be portable. If we zero in Nigeria and say, okay, bright future, tech-savvy people, a number of people needing these interventions and actually acting upon interventions like Auntie's outlined as well, taking advantage of them. So what are the threats? The opportunities appear obvious, and our ability to seize them increasing, right? So what are the threats?
Yeah, I think, of course, there are threats. There is all new technologies and all developments in society comes to it that you can use that in evil ways as well if you have bad intentions. And that's something for all of us to make sure that we build the correct or the good regulations together to control that. So, yeah.
So any regulation you have in mind?
No, I'm not the regulator designer here, so I wouldn't go into those details.
You've got your...
I could take that.
Yeah.
So the threats are, for example, in India, the government is collecting a huge amount of data, and there are no practices and protocols for, at what level should you share that data. So, for example, some people in a particular state accessed healthcare subsidies, and the government put up that data online. So you could actually go through that data and see who, bought Viagra. And you don't want that. That's a gross privacy violation. So the threat is that people lose control over their data. There are no practices, protocols in place for sharing of data. The threat is that if you aggregate data, there is enormous amount of value that can be created out of that. But you need systems and protocols for extracting that value. So for example, if say a flu outbreak is happening and you need medicines to reach that particular spot, unless and until you have a system where you can extract the aggregated data, you can't do that. So we need to build that protocols. The other thing is that legally you need systems in place where, in India what we have done is that we have said that if I give you my data, you are my data fiduciary. You have a fiduciary responsibility to hold that data in trust and use that data in my best interest. So you need technical systems in place, you need regulatory systems in place.
I think also a threat, sorry for interrupting, is also that we get bad data and biased data as well. The data that we get is an effect of the questions that we actually ask. So if we don't ask the right questions to the right people, we're not getting we're getting corrupt data and we're getting biased data. And I think that's really important to see from when we're building our models to when we're assessing to whom we're asking, to what we're asking, and the responses that we expect. So I think that's really important when we're building our predictive models as well.
I think it's. I was building up the analytics team at Spotify from 2010 and onwards, and I think I've been living through this emergence or like the the times where the world started to explore what you can do with data, what data means. And I think there is so much we can now learn from what we have experienced during these years, and how we've seen what works and how we should do things, and what we should not do. So I think even from that perspective, now when designing new services which can use all the benefits of having data, we can do that in a way which is much more controlled and safe for everyone, that we didn't know in the beginning, but now we know.
Well, for cash transfers, the FOI Act actually safeguards the identities of those who get social grants. But we are building protocols around the data that we have collated now. So if anybody wants to give benefits to over 65, only of poor households, of course, because that's the data we have, we can share, but there are certain protocols that we're building. But of course, there's a lot to learn, because, it's easier to leapfrog and not make any mistakes. That's happening around the world. So this is a discussion that we must continue to have. Thank you.
Where do those protocols that you've built in, where do they stem from? So for Facebook, one of the things, and I actually think Venki's point about how companies should act, I think actually a lot of companies are harmonizing, or at least coming to similar ways in how they manage data, how they share data, etc. Auntie, I'm interested in the protocols that you employ. Where do they stem from? So there's the NETA Data Protection Act that we have here, and very recently there was a proposed act, I forget the ministry, also proposing a Data Protection Act as well. So you had these two acts, in some cases similar, but also with different clauses. And for stakeholders like yourself who are working with data and trying to put these protocols in place, I question externally whether that causes some confusion. And because of this very vivid example you've brought, I'm wondering, where do you build your protocols from?
Let me respond to that. Okay, so very good point. First, I must say that I'm very encouraged that the question around safeguards has stemmed from Facebook. That's really encouraging. Because that's where sometimes you worry because you have the most data. But I think this also
I'd argue there's other companies do.
This portrays the fact that the need for this coordination around building a robust and inclusive and a mature and self-regulated, where the citizens have more control of the data. And what we're doing in Nigeria is actually trying to harmonize what is going to be the data protection policy. So you're right, NIDA did have a data protection policy. The National Identity Management Commission, NIMC, also was building one. But there's effort to actually coordinate that and become one full-fledged policy for Nigeria. In fact, the overall end game should be a policy that's encompassing for Africa because of the AFCFTA.
Yeah.
But I think without a shadow of a doubt, there's evidence that digital economy, digitization of processes, getting the citizens fully involved, brings immense benefits. But safeguards are very critical. We still have a lot of work to do in Nigeria, as evidenced by the work, the conversation from Mrs. Ways. In wrapping up, one example I've seen is there's a lot of active citizens in the unincluded or in inclusive, but they're very active. So being able to have them involved and included allows for opportunities for them. That I see in terms of the empowerment. There are lots of small businesses, the fintechs that are offering loans in Nigeria today, and a lot of this is based on digital footprints. So because the regular formal banks don't have that information. So we see the benefits in that regard. Benefit in terms of insurance, benefit in terms of pension, benefit in terms of health. So, Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports, you still have leverage at the telecommunications industry, and I'm glad that you're a lover of technology. So, I think we're on the right path. Yeah. In summing up, because we need to just wrap up, is just to say thank you to everyone, and with the conversation will continue offline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's just take a picture with the panel before you answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks very much to the panel. And thank you to Larry for rounding up just as I was about to start dancing. We're going to make some further adjustments to the program for today. So the next speaker we'll be bringing up will be Michael Elliott, the Senior Vice President, Strategic Growth for MasterCard. And then after him, we'll be inviting Michael Ahlström, the founder of the park in Sweden, who will be joined by Carolina Emanuelsson, who represents Hack for Sweden. They will give 10-15 minutes presentations each, and then we'll be collapsing the panel, the leadership panel discussion that was scheduled for 11:55, together with the one that was scheduled for 2:30. We'll be collapsing both those panels into one so that we can hopefully finish by 1:30 at the latest. I would now like to invite Mr. Michael Elliott, Senior Vice President, Strategic Growth for MasterCard, to give us a keynote speech on case studies of transforming lives and economies in Africa. Mr. Elliott, please. I was wondering where you were.
Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. My name is Mike Elliott. So I'm the Senior Vice President for the Financial Inclusion and Strategic Growth portfolio within MasterCard Labs. So what that means is, how do I think about innovation in areas that are in new spaces for MasterCard, in areas that are in agriculture and education and SME space. So I'm really excited to be here today. I want to do a couple things today. I want to give you a sense of how we as MasterCard are playing in these non-traditional spaces. So giving you some examples of what we're doing in the agriculture space, in the SME space, and I'll talk about some others as well. And I want to give you some very tactical examples of how we're partnering with others to do that, and how we look to partner with governments across that. Before I do that though, let me just quickly introduce kind of how I ended up in this space. And about 16 years ago, I landed in Niamey, Niger, a bit north of here, as part of a 3-year work stint in Niger. I spent the first half of that in a farming community, about 10K out of Sai, a place called Morikwara. It was a house of village in the middle of Zarmaland, and I was there to work with farmers in the village. Most of the farmers there, as you could imagine, were subsistence farmers, right? Growing sorghum and millet mostly. At least that's what the parents did. But the youth in the village wanted something different, right? They didn't want to be subsistence farmers. They wanted opportunities. They wanted something better. What they wanted, and they may not have said it this way, but what they wanted is they wanted to be part of the real economy. They wanted opportunities to farm as a business. They wanted opportunities to engage in economic activity, not to be just getting barely by like their parents had. And so that's what I've spent the bulk of my career now doing, is thinking about how we solve this problem, right? How do we leverage digital tools and innovations to help people who want to be part of the real economy but aren't today? That's what I do. Within MasterCard, why do we care about this space, and why do we think about this space, right? When we think about the real economy within MasterCard, what we often start with is something called financial inclusion, because that's core to our business. And that's important because we know today that there are 2 billion people that are not financially included. A disproportionate number of those are women and youth. And those people don't have access to many of the tools that we take for granted in this room today, right? They can't save for a rainy day or an unexpected expense. They can't borrow credit at a reasonable rate. They can't get insurance to protect them against unforeseen events. And so we as MasterCard then, And the clicker has gone quite. Next slide, please. There we go. We as MasterCard then made a commitment about 5 years ago. We as MasterCard, I say that, it's actually Ajay, our CEO, made a commitment to onboard 500 million individuals onto formal financial systems, leveraging our platforms, because we think we as a company need to play a role in this space, right? We can't just sit there and be a card company for the wealthy or for the kind of the masses, middle class. We need to be thinking about how we as a company can engage with the base of the pyramid in emerging markets. So we put this goal to ourselves, 500 million. And fortunately, we are on the cusp of hitting that. We aimed to hit that by the end of 2020. We're on the cusp of hitting that a year early right now. And we're thinking about what's next. And it needs to be beyond just access, it needs to be usage. And so that's a bit of what I'll talk about today. How do we create usage and use cases around this financial inclusion space for the base of the pyramid? To do that, we leverage a couple different groups within MasterCard. And I sit at the nexus of two of those groups. I sit in the world of MasterCard Labs, so that's how we think about innovation, how we think about new products, new services, leveraging technology like AI or blockchain to do our business differently. But then I sit also in the nexus of a group called the MasterCard Strategic Growth Organization. And that organization, I think, is highly relevant to what we're doing today, because it has three goals. How do we work with governments? How do we do that around innovative solutions and business models? And how do we use both of those to drive social impact? I think many of you heard Grant, a colleague of mine yesterday. Grant's part of that government engagement team, right? How do we engage with governments? And I focus a lot now on the innovative solutions, and together we should be driving social impact for this organization and for the world. And we do this with partnerships. I think that partnerships part is incredibly important to understand, right? Everything we do, if we are looking to strengthen communities, if we are looking to drive access to the real economy for underprivileged or underserved people, we need to do that in partnership. It's the only way. We believe that the societal challenges we're trying to solve are too big for either the public sector in itself, or the government by itself, and certainly for the private sector by itself. It's when we bring the best assets from both of us together that we think that there can be a real impact. I'll give you an example of this. In Uganda, we are doing work in the education sector. It's a product called Coupa. And basically what we're trying to do is how do we make it easier for parents in very rural villages to pay school fees more effectively? And how do we give schools a better way to track those incoming payments? And how do we give governments visibility into those payments so they understand how schools are operating from a financial standpoint? So we created this product in partnership with the government of Uganda, with the Ministry of Education. We rolled it out in partnership with the government. It was a co-creation exercise, co-creating the platform, co-creating the program around the platform in order to drive change in an area that was really underserved. And today we have over 250,000 students on board that platform in Uganda, and we're starting to roll it out more globally. So that just gives you an example of how we think about this partnership aspect of what we do. I don't have a ton of time left, so let me just talk quickly about two examples then in a bit more detail. So agriculture. Agriculture is one of the most important areas that we look at within MasterCard, within my space, within how do we think about the evolution of our company and reaching out to the base of the pyramid. In part, it's because of the size of it, right? We forecast 750 million smallholder farmers in Africa by 2030. McKinsey did a study. They saw a potential for $880 billion of GDP, of agricultural output hitting the GDP if we remove key barriers. And removing key barriers are the things that you would guess, right? How do we make infrastructure better, access to markets better, access to credit for better inputs? How do we do that? We can drive 880 billion in agricultural output. That's about 3 times what it is today. We also know that farmers are underserved today by financial products. Less than 6% of them are using financial services beyond basic wallets or P2P transfers. But we know they have mobile phones, so we know that there is a way to connect to them. That mobile phone is oftentimes a feature phone today. So I see a lot, I've been in this ag space for a long time now. I see a lot of people coming up with apps for farmers. That's wonderful for that farmer that's sitting in Lagos, or that farmer that's sitting in Nairobi or Kampala. It's not so useful when you're the farmer that's sitting out in the village, and either you don't have 3G connectivity, or if you do, it's very expensive, so you rarely turn your data on. So we need to be thinking about technologically appropriate solutions in this space. But they do have mobile devices. So we know there's a lot of potential here. There's a significant size. And we know the challenges, right? We know farmers have some of the most complex livelihoods of anyone. So really lumpy incomes. Maybe you get 80% of your income in once or twice a year in a bullet payment when you sell your crops. We know your expenses are lumpy as well. So really complex financial livelihoods, very little access to formal financial products, oftentimes cash-based. And so that's what we stepped into as an organization. We said, as MasterCard, we need to be providing solutions that work for this space. So one of the first ones we created was something called, well, before I do that, let me see if I can you click one more into the video, if you don't mind? Let's see if this video works. Can you click on that video, perhaps? This is a testimonial of a farmer in Uganda who uses MasterCard Farmers Network to access markets. Do you guys mind trying to click on the video itself and just play? There we go, thanks. Is there any sound by any chance? No? Tell you what, you can skip the video then if there's no sound. All right, well, I guess you can read the subtitles. Let me tell you a little bit of what they're doing, right? So MasterCard Farmers Network was a platform we created out of the Nairobi lab. So we have a lab in Nairobi as part of our MasterCard Labs network. All that lab does is think about financial inclusion and how we reach the base of the pyramid. So coming out of that lab was a product called the MasterCard Farmers Network. And that product connects farmers to markets. It helps them get access to better prices. It helps suppliers in this space source from smallholder farmers more cost effectively, because we know that's a challenge today. And what's really interesting is it leverages a lot of the data that comes off, if you can go one before, please, into the Farmers Network one slide before. Just come back one slide. Nope, that's the other direction. There we go, cool. What's interesting is that it leverages the data from that platform, right? So if I know what a farmer's getting paid for his agricultural outputs, right? I have a really good sense of their income. I can leverage that data then to drive access to financing for that farmer. I can unlock formal financing for the farmer based on the data of what they're selling. And that's really impactful. And that's something that we've heard is universal, right? That's not just in South Africa or Southern Africa or East Africa or West Africa. It's not just in India where we're doing a lot of this work as well. That's universal. How do we leverage data to provide access to farmers to formal financial services? So where are we today with this, right? So we are, in India, we co-created this program with the government of Andhra Pradesh. So we went into the Ministry of Andhra Pradesh, and the minister there, Minister of Horticulture, said, I have a problem with my horticulture farmers. I know where they are. I can't reach out to them. I'm struggling to connect them to the markets they want, and I want to do something with them. So we co-created a program leveraging this platform, MFN, to actually drive access to markets in India, and we're doing that. We got a potential to reach 1 million horticulture farmers alone in Andhra Pradesh. In Tanzania and in Kenya and in Uganda, we're working with the Center for Tropical Agriculture, CIAT. I know they have a lab down in Ifakara, I believe. Working with CIAT and another organization called USADF. Same idea. How do we drive a program with the public sector support to farmers? And we've got almost 500,000 farmers now on that program. And then we're working with other private partnerships as well. We have a partnership with Rabobank, looking to globally transform how agriculture works, leveraging some of their partnerships. So that's just in kind of this part of the world. In Mexico, we're doing work with Neumann Cafe Group. They're the largest exporter of and buyer of coffee. They've got something like 60 different companies they own in 27 different markets. And we're working with them on these same types of problems. How do you digitize payments to farmers? How do you give farmers digital value storage and ecosystems around that? And how do you use that as an on-ramp to additional financial services? So that's what I think a lot about in agriculture. If we can go to the next one now. Excellent, thank you. Let's talk about SMEs for a second, or MSMEs even, micro and small and medium enterprises. Another area of big focus for mine over the last couple of years. For many of the same reasons as agriculture, right? We know it's a big space. We know in emerging markets there's somewhere between 365 million and 450 million micro and small and medium enterprises. It's a big part of the workforce. oftentimes up to 60% of the workforce in emerging markets. It's a big part of the GDP, up to 40%. And that's true in Nigeria as well. As reading stats is coming up here, around 50% of the GDP is driven largely by the MSME sector, right? But we know that they have challenges as well. If you were to look at a female entrepreneur today in an emerging market, 70% of them either don't have access at all to formal financial services or only have access to really high interest rate short-term loans. Right? How are you going to grow a business as a woman entrepreneur if that's the situation you're in? We need to solve that problem. We need to unlock that credit for them. And so that's a lot of what we're doing now. So we created a product called KeoNect. So KeoNect basically said, if you look at an SME and you look around them, you can look at the things you can digitize, right? You can digitize their sales to customers, and that's actually a lot of our core business today. A lot of our acceptance business within MasterCard is how do you digitize the relationship between a consumer and a retailer. That's hard, we know, in many emerging markets, something we're working on, but it's challenging. So what if you were to digitize the relationship between the micro enterprise and the supplier? So if I know what they're buying, and if I know what they're buying from a Unilever or a P&G or a Coke or a Pepsi, and I know what they're buying, I have a pretty good sense of what they're selling. And if I can digitize that relationship, working in partnership with some of these very large FMCGs or CPG players, I can use that data about what a micro merchant is buying to unlock access to finance. I can take that data about what the micro merchant is buying and I can bring it to the banking sector and I can say, this is someone you should lend to and here's about how much you should lend. And this is what we're doing today with KeoNect. We're doing this in Egypt right now. I was just spent a good part of my October in Egypt, in Alexandria, working with the central bank there. Central bank, like many central banks right now, are thinking about how we drive access to credit for small and medium enterprises. So working with the central bank there, working with the National Bank of Egypt, and working with a distributor called Speed on solving this problem. And we've launched now, and we're going to be scaling up across the early part of 2020. We're doing something similar down in Mozambique right now with a product called Community Commerce. Same idea, but it's much more around digitizing informal credit. I don't know if this happens today. If you go to any township or village or informal settlement, you'll often find that the merchants themselves are extending informal credit to consumers. How do we digitize that, capture that information, and leverage it to help the merchants and the consumers get access to credit? That's what we're doing today right now. I was going to do a quick demo. I think I still have time. Let me just show you something real quick to make this a bit more real. This is the KeoNect platform that we launched in Egypt here. I'm going to show you two things. I'm going to show you how the merchant interacts with the platform to actually drive orders. And then I'll show you how the agent or the supplier interacts with the platform. So we're going to start with the merchant here. This assumes that the merchant has a smartphone, which we see in many of the urban areas they do. So it's the merchant has a smartphone, they're going to place an order, right? They want to order some goods. They go onto their KeoNect app. They click New Order. They get a list of items to buy. They select those items that they're they get a summary of kind of what that order looks like, how much it's going to cost, and they click, great, select payment. Now what you're going to see here is that there's actually a lot of different modalities of payment. One of the things I think surprises people sometimes about MasterCard is that we do not assume that the base of the pyramid is sitting on a card, right?